God is telling Moses about the judgment that's about to fall on Egypt. That because of the sin that Egypt had committed repeatedly, not only in enslaving the Israelites, but in repeatedly ignoring the command of God to let them go, repeatedly rebelling against God and daring God to do something about it. For this sin, for this rebellion against God, God is about to judge Egypt. Now, sometimes we will look at these Old Testament stories and we will think they have nothing to do with us today. Let me tell you, the judgment of God is just as certain today as it was then. We think because we live in a different time we are somehow immune to this, but listen. We live in a world that deserves the judgment of God every bit as much as Egypt, if not more. We look at some of the things that are going on around us. I was appalled this week to hear that there's a court case in New York demanding the right for a parent to be able to marry their child and saying that it is protected, the right to do so is protected under the 14th Amendment. There's another court case in Texas saying that abortion is considered a religious exercise under the First Amendment and any rules against it should be struck down by the courts. We've got madness like this going on, and not only in the culture outside, but far too many of our churches compromising with and capitulating to the spirit of the age instead of standing firm on the authority of God's Word and calling men lovingly but truthfully to be reconciled to a holy God. Instead of that, we try to accommodate what the culture wants. If ever there has been a society that has been ripe for the judgment of God, it's ours. And so we can't look at this and say, this is a different world, this has nothing to do with us. Folks, this could be ripped from the headlines of today's newspaper. It doesn't mean that God's going to send the angel of death and take every firstborn. It doesn't mean that every bad thing that happens is the judgment of God. It's just, my point in this is saying, if God looked at Egypt and its sin in enslaving the Israelites and refusing to listen to Him, if God looked at them and said, I am absolutely going to judge, we cannot delude ourselves today into thinking that God will ignore our sin and let it go.